So this panel is all about being friends. I think one of the things that we kind of want to first get out here is kind of why we're talking about partnerships. It's not just kind of watching the grass grow. It's really something new, and what it's really touching on, and I had this experience last night where I was on a kind of online ordering site. I'm not going to mention which one, but I found myself getting delivery from the same pretty crappy Indian place over and over again, and I couldn't figure out why. And really, what it was because, I would typically go on Yelp, find the best place, and then, call them up. But the experience, the transactional experience on the site was so much better. They didn't have the better places. And really, what that was about, and kind of what we lost, was that consumer experience. And I think one of the things we're seeing, one of the things we're talking a lot about right now, is this idea of really understanding local as a marketplace. And the primary focus is how can we make buying and selling goods locally a better experience. And that means all aspects from search to transactions to delivery to loyalty and engagement, bringing all those things together. And really the only way we're going to do it as an industry is by partnering and working with one another. So this whole panel is going to really be thinking about how do we bring that kind of one-click magical experience, that Amazon experience to local. And so I'm just going to kind of start out, let these guys introduce themselves, talk about kind of where they are, and something a little kind of interesting and unique about yourself. So, Ohad, sorry.
Hi everyone, good morning. My name is Ohad. I'm currently the North America lead for the Wildfire Partner Program. This is a new program that has been established after the acquisition of Wildfire. Previously, I worked on Google's channel sales team, which worked with partners in the market that really help us in the local space.
Good morning. Thank you for having me here on the panel. Excited for the conversation. I'm Jed. I'm CEO of Delivery.com. I started my career back in the internet dark ages at a company called Netscape, if you guys remember that company. Based here in New York, and I guess the irreverent story that I can tell about myself is that I had dinner comped once in New York because the managing staff and waiter thought I was Adrian Brody. That's my story.
Hi, I'm Aron Schwarzkopf. I'm the CEO of Leaf. We're a company up in Boston, and what we do is pretty much a platform of mobile commerce through point of sales. Funny story about me is I traveled from Boston last night, and the person right next to me actually dumped all her drink on top of me. So I've been scrambling all morning to figure out, how to buy clothes to be here. Yeah.
All right. First, I'm just going to ask you guys to kind of, Aron, will you pull your chair up a little bit? We're kind of leaning to, just, you guys can hang back. I just want to make kind of a acapella semicircle here. So, I touched a little bit on it, but kind of the question I want to know is, partnerships are obviously always an important part of business, but why now? Why, why are we talking about now? And why is it not just about kind of reselling, not just about pushing a product or getting more reach, but really becoming material to kind of what that consumer experience is. And I know, when we spoke, you really talk about a shift in the way Google approached its channel sales platform, and I'd love for you to talk about that a little bit.
Sure. So first of all, I think overarching answer for this question is complexity, right? As we think about the proliferation of solutions and devices really in the market, for businesses, small businesses, it's become to be very difficult to make the right decisions, right? How should it really, am I optimizing my advertising marketing strategy? Who should I pick? Who's the best partner for me to really move forward? And Google had this really major shift in perception a few years back of changing between a reseller that could be seen as just a one-way communication to a partner program, which is basically a dialogue, right? We want to look at the ecosystem as a whole. What are the challenges that we see there, and how can we solve it? Not just solve it for us. How can we really increase the quality of service providers, increase the quality for our advertisers, increase the quality for users, and really make this much more about solving the problems together?
But you always want to make the consumer experience better. Like, what was the new? Was it mobile technology? Was it a kind of rash of new startups? What was that kind of that new catalyst that really drove you from thinking, okay, we can't just do a reseller, we really have to kind of shift the way we think about this?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the answer for this is really, I think, looking at different aspects of how we see the local space, right? One, we want to understand and we acknowledge the fact that there's a lot of innovation on the space of companies out there, and they have their leverages by understanding relationship with businesses on the ground, right? As we look at the online industry, really there's so much complexity around the different products, and if you want to look at the whole picture, really connect data, then you have to start thinking about partnerships and how you can really aggregate that picture to have the best insights to make decisions.
So Aron, you guys are, a little younger than Google and slightly smaller. But, I think you guys really launched, Leaf, really launched with partnerships as a fundamental part of your business model. And I'd love for you to think about kind of what technologies, talking about mobile, how does that allow for a kind of a more open, integrated experience in the kind of local ecosystem?
Perfect. So we started from a basic principle. Whatever mobile technology or the cloud reaches an industry, what it really does, it makes technology accessible and affordable. And I bet all of us have had our share of actually knocking on doors of small businesses, and we realize there that the legacy business models or the legacy resellers, right, are not educated enough to actually help the merchant, right? So we had this thought of, any mobile technology that comes into the merchant really needs to become a friend or a consultant of that merchant, right? Because what the cloud is doing is for a small business, they can now have Walmart-like analytics and business intelligence for pennies. The problem is they don't have time or understand how to do it. And the guy who usually sells either inventory or payments or communication that goes in and knocks their doors are built in a legacy thought of mine in a business model, right, that doesn't really help the merchant, but really sells a commodity for the merchant in that sense, right? So what we believed in doing since inception is to open a platform, and we believe that through the point of sales, it's really the gateway to start that friendship with a small business. So like what the iPhone, a smartphone, does for people like you and me, which we're completely dependent on and aggregates all of these services and personalizes our experience however we want, we're sort of emulating that on the other side of the counter with point of sales and personalizing for the local business whatever they want.
So, when we talk about simplicity, we're talking about the destruction of a lot of money that's being made in these traditional industries. You look at a micros, point of sale business, 60% of their income comes from essentially all the service related business, the installation, the servicing. So they're essentially making money off having a faulty product. And so when you simplify, you lose a lot of that potential value. And so Jed, when you guys think about your business, you've been a little, online ordering has been around for a little while. How do you think about, you want to partner with guys, like Aron, but you don't want to lose those potential revenue opportunities. And I'd love to hear kind of how you think about what are the kind of frames of your business as a delivery business.
Yeah, and maybe just in reference to what Aron was saying, is I think if you refer to it as a faulty product, I refer to it as kind of a product that wasn't completed. I mean, Oracle was disrupted by Salesforce in the same regard, because they basically said if an enterprise is going to spend most of their money on having to keep the thing working or even getting it set up in the first place, it seems like a bad relationship from the get-go. And a local merchant, their business is to do what they do normally. It's not to figure out technology. So when a point of sale system can basically directly disrupt what a Micros does, just like what Salesforce did with Oracle, I think there's a huge opportunity for what they're doing. And as it relates to us and why partnering with a company like Aron's would make sense, it's because at the end of the day, our business, while it being a commerce platform, we're collecting an enormous amount of data about what people do, where they do it, when they do it, why they do it. And I think that we have an obligation to really, we have two customers, right? So we have the end user and we have the merchant. We have an obligation to the merchant to make sure that they get smarter about how they can compete. And the merchants we deal with, say for example, a local grocer, is competing now not only with a national brand that's encroaching down the street like a Whole Foods, but they're also dealing with a Fresh Direct. And so it's really not only in our business, but almost really an obligation that we have to find ways to better serve that merchant. And we, by the basis of the fact that we do one thing well, and we're trying to do other things as well along the side, it's almost without question, we have to find partners to do that. And so, do we give up something by forming partnerships? No, I think the opposite. We actually are better serving the merchant in that regard.
So Delivery.com makes their money by bringing demand to merchants, correct? So are you a marketing company or are you a commerce company?
Well, in the case of what we do really two parts, right? We create, as you said, demand, or we basically generate a lead in that regard for a merchant in an area that they really don't have a lot of expertise in, which is online. So their business is obviously offline, and our job is to complement that with an online component and become important enough to their business mix that they want to figure out more ways to get more orders from us, right? You could also look at us really as an aggregator of supply. So that there are other websites, say for example like a Yelp or a Google, that are aggregating demand. And so for us, we look at that as a distribution channel. Over time, we're going to continue to try to drive demand directly to the merchant, but we're also going to find other pockets and sources of demand that can help us basically syndicate our content, as it were, to them, and ultimately direct more traffic and more orders in that regard back to the merchant.
Great.
Actually, I just wanted to add something about this. I very much agree with that approach. Just to give one example, Google recently launched a new partner program that basically provides and lets businesses the opportunity to be found by customers of basically through a search engine just for partners. And the reason why this is happening is because we want to make sure that there's enough transparency from these partners and businesses to their customers and recognize them for their understanding and abilities to really execute and fulfill online needs of their businesses.
So let's stay with you. I think one of the interesting things is the impact that some of these commerce companies, some of these commerce developments have on the search industry. I was giving that example last night, that the value of finding the best business was not as important as the ease of use in buying. And that let me go to Seamless or versus Yelp. And so I'm trying to understand from Google's perspective, what impact do you think all of these kind of delivery services, online ordering service, what impact does that have on the search business and the way you kind of frame your relationships with your resellers and eventually the merchants that you're connecting with?
Yeah, so I think, to answer this, maybe look at just one specific example. It's been almost 6 months since we launched enhanced campaigns, which, the big objective to this is really, as we continue with our efforts to improve quality, that's really adding more context to searches. So the quality of the results, both organic and paid for the user, would really answer their needs, right? But from a partner perspective, it makes it much more easier for these partners or service providers to really execute on these campaigns. So moving forward, I think that in terms of product strategy, we will make it easier for these partners to interact with our products and execute them to scale, allowing much more interactions on a local basis.
So I think this was one thing that was interesting was, in thinking about essentially when it becomes interactive and you're not just reselling kind of a boxed piece of software, you have to have data not only flowing from Google, the business, but also from the business back. And I'm curious what kind of data you're taking, when these guys are running the campaign through kind of a local, search marketing guy. What data are you kind of taking back from the merchants? What data is flowing back to Google?
Right. So today, I think the fact that we have full transparency on the analytics side of it, we really focus on that rather on really gathering it from the businesses. Moving forward, the fact that some of these partners and businesses have more insights into really what happens on that last part of the funnel, right? The actually sales, maybe offline in some cases. That's information that Google might be able to use to make much more of the decision process.
Sure. So I think one of the kind of conversations we have a lot. When we talk about this is, do we want to have a company as a marketplace, a Square or Groupon that's trying to build both kind of consumer demand and they have their wallet feature and all these features, and then they have their kind of supply side features. They've got their point of sale systems, they got their payment processing, or do we want a kind of marketplace industry as a marketplace kind of model, kind of the open versus closed model? And Aron, I know you've been kind of really outspoken about this. I'm kind of curious if you could help us kind of understand, why local more than other industries really needs a more open model versus a closed product?
Because they're all different. That's What I've realized since we started, it's small businesses, right? You can't really say there's a category like small businesses. Even a pizza shop and the one across the street are completely different and have completely different needs, right? And the only way you can personalize that is by allowing them to basically input and use their data with whoever they want. So I'm a big proponent of the open platform, and we're open APIs, and we're basically that secret garden that was the point of sales of the data that, for example, would help Google quite a bit on the sales side, right? We're completely open to that in the benefit of the merchant. If a merchant is using someone who has a closed platform, it actually is offering every single service to him. So you have to buy my point of sales, you have to buy my loyalty, you have to buy my ads, you have to buy everything, right? It doesn't create that best experience for the merchant. It doesn't allow him to pick what he wants, and at the same time, it sort of, builds some sort of controlling and uncompetitive factor in servicing that merchant. The other big thing to realize about open platform when it comes to distribution is that there's so many local businesses, right? And each one at certain cadences in time is looking for a different service, right? So being open, right, it really allows you to deliver your product much faster than you would, right? In our case, most of, because of the legacy business models of point of sales, most of the merchants, like 90%, are under some weird contract that they don't know about, right? And usually when they're looking for another service that we power through APIs, our POS gets put right next to a micros, and then the staff member, gets to pick if he wants to play with a cool POS or a very old dinosaur in that sense, and that's how we go in there, pretty much. Right? So, I think open platform is a key to best merchant experience.
Yeah, I think in the future, I'd like to see, or that's how maybe the vision of what's going to happen is much more of the consolidation, convergence between these different companies and solutions. And the idea and the reason is there's so much data that is lost just in between, and because of this fragmentation, that in order to really take the full insights out of what the activity is, you really have to start to have these partners or different agencies talk to each other, whether through a solution, a platform, or really in just consolidation of different activities.
I can just add one point. I'd say that for us, we almost have a dependency on the need for the industry to become open. And just as one example, the restaurant industry is one in which that the amount of inventory that they carry changes, frankly, maybe twice a year, 4 times a year by season. But if you move into another vertical where the inventory set can be in the hundreds or the thousands, we could basically spend all night just entering data and maintaining it. We don't want to be in that business. We want to be in the business, as you said, of generating demand and enabling orders to be transacted and fulfilled. So in the case of where the relationship, say, for example, of a POS system and us could very much be complementary, is that when we send an order to a merchant, we can figure out all kinds of fancy ways for them to confirm, but why not just send it directly into the POS system for it to be confirmed there? And in the same regard, if the POS system is collecting inventory information, that might be a better way for us to be able to figure out deltas in the information that's being displayed on our site relative to what's in the store. Because I can tell you, we are not a review site. We are a place where people buy things. And if somebody walks into a store and that store doesn't carry what you want, there's a very high probability that you may not come back. And so we live in the same world. What's on our site has to be interactive and transactable. So you have to be able to purchase what's on the site. Otherwise, you're dealing with a very upset consumer who wanted that, but instead they get this. So we almost have a need, really a dependency on the industry becoming far more open than it is today.
So I'm curious, because Delivery.com does have reviews, it does have content, but it's not a content site, but you need that to be able to kind of provide a certain experience today. So I think one of the great things about local is it's a bunch of companies that are waiting for tomorrow. The ones who are going to succeed are the ones who are going to figure out how to kind of make it through today and how to kind of patch these things together. And I'm just curious kind of how you think about developing products, like a reviews product, even though that's not going to be the core part of your business, and kind of how that works. I'm going to develop that, or I'm going to partner with another content site and just have it completely go through there.
So in terms of reviews, certainly we can incorporate some of the kind of industry standards for review into our website. But I think what's becoming more and more important to people is the ability to see what other people are doing, and certainly within their social network. So I think what's going to happen over time is that the commerce experience, for the most part, whether it be on our site or others, I think is pretty lonely. And I think this whole concept of social and commerce are certainly going to blend over time, because not just because it's fun, but because it's actually valuable. And so when you can provide depth to whether it be a merchant's page on a website or just the overall experience, you're changing, I think, fundamentally the way people shop, because you're giving them the ability to see what others recommend. Long time ago, when Amazon first came out with this, it was, we may also recommend this book if you want that one. I mean, it seems simple, but it's actually pretty brilliant. When you can apply that within a kind of a social network dynamic, I think it fundamentally shifts the way people shop. And again, it's almost like we have an obligation to expose that information to people.
But you know, content in that say, whether it's automated content in the sense of saying, I'm going to recommend something to you, it's still content that is material to a commerce business. So I mean, if it's very material to your business, how do you feel about kind of relying on a partner to kind of provide that? No.
Well, there's two things. In the case of a review, we could have our own review platform, and we can also incorporate a review system like Yelp's. But in the case of a dish recommendation, we're collecting that data, right? So we can write the algo to be able to expose to people in a particular zip code what's trending, as it were, what's the hot dish, or what, if you like that kind of cuisine, what is popular. So we collect a lot of that information. It's just basically a matter of now turning around and exposing it in a way that's useful to the consumer. To the extent that that information is better for us to incorporate from a third party, that's fine, but we're collecting that information in real time, so we want to expose it directly back to our community.
Right. So openness is just kind of like fragmentation of services, and the more you kind of bleed these features, we've seen this, like loyalty, there's a few companies and it becomes insanely commoditized within an incredibly quick period. Aaron, you're talking about a point of sale. I mean, you mentioned that you said point of sale would probably be commoditized somewhat soon. So if you're not bundling all of these services within kind of one big, bundle and reselling that, where does your money come from? I mean, Aaron, I'm curious, like 3 years from now, what's your biggest revenue stream?
I have a bet with my head of product that I never want to do point of sales in the next 18 months, right? So if he gets there by that time, that'd be great. Things fastly get commoditized, and other than that, it's just overwhelming, especially for locals. If you point out loyalty or reviews, there's so much stuff out there, right? And they get bombarded every day, and all they're thinking about is running their business, right? So it's definitely about bundling, and for me, it's key. We have a concept internally called a digital fingerprint. So everyone here in the room, we either have it with Google, Apple, or Amazon, and maybe the three of them, but we're starting to build sort of an avatar of ourselves, right, in the cloud, and every time more we integrate more data and more preferences there. And I think for us as Leaf is actually creating that digital fingerprint, but on the other side of the counter, so for the merchant. So it's exactly that same business model. That's what we strive for. We don't strive to be a POS vendor that much.
Awesome. Just wanted to quickly open up the panel to questions from the audience. Anybody have any questions for these wonderful gentlemen? All right. Okay, so the kind of last thing I want to touch on is the legacy issue. There's a lot of really big legacy companies that own a lot of, not own, but have existing relationships with a lot of merchants, but they're not very easy to work with. I mean, I'm curious kind of what role you're seeing, whether they're an asset or a liability for your growth of your business.
Yeah, and I think, Aaron, you touched about this earlier. So we work with a lot of the traditional media companies, as well as the big YPs globally, and it's all about transforming their business. And it's definitely not an easy process. It requires a lot of education internally, as well as really a mind shift between how you roll up business. Some of these have massive sales forces, and it's just really about taking it a step towards a step of re-entering the digital world or changing the specific focus of that company and get to make it profitable for these businesses.
Jed, are you guys working with a Micros, a legacy kind of point of sale provider? Is that something that's viable?
I mean, I think the problem with integrating with the legacy system, it's kind of the same point I made around Oracle and Salesforce, is that Micros is not integrating with one car. It's integrating with the family of Toyota cars. And within the Toyota family, there's the Camry and the Land Cruiser. And the Land Cruiser comes in the 2007 Standard Edition and 2007 deluxe edition, and so on and so forth. So you could spend basically your entire life spending your available capital on integrating with third-party systems that, frankly, are exactly what you said, legacy. So I think we're looking forward, and we're looking to see where the market emerges, and we want to find ways to be able to be light in our integration, but at the same time fast. So frankly, do I think that there's a play in integrating with legacy systems? Sure. Do I think it's core to our business? No.
Aron, would you guys sell through? There's a lot of these kind of like these big yellow pages companies that have a lot of these huge kind of standing sales force. I mean, is that a channel for you guys?
Yeah, actually, for us, it's been a love-hate relationship. We just took a bunch of money from a very legacy mentality company, right? Especially in the payment processing space, right? I believe it's less of a prompt disruption, but actually an evolution, especially with a lot of these legacy companies, which understand that their business models need to change and evolve, and the nature of their sales force needs to change and evolve. One of the things we do, because we became open platform and basically we became an answer to aggregators such as Square and Groupon for the legacy providers, right? They put their apps in our system and can process payments there however they want. We had a lot of those resellers, and after a month of our reseller program, we realized that without education, no one can resell our program. So we actually fired all of our resellers, and actually now they need to apply and have mobile technology education before they can sell our product. Very, very different than what other people are doing, but we're strong believers in being able to make that evolution, because I also think that the small business, the local business salesman, right? It doesn't matter if he's selling Comcast, AT&T, or First Data, whatever he's selling to the merchant, right? He needs to start becoming more of the consultant of the merchant as opposed to the guy who knocks the door and writes some paper. So we certainly believe in an evolution, and I think we can utilize a lot of these legacy distribution channels, right, as a method for growing our businesses, right, and changing and disrupting.
I'm curious, which legacy business do you think has the biggest shot of sticking around?
I'm being honest, I'm young and I've been a disruptor, so I heard Seth talk, I really do believe that charging for payments is ridiculous, but I don't think it's going to change anytime soon, and perhaps never. I think every time more you start realizing that all these legacy businesses that are huge, right, networking, payments, all of these foundations of every offline business, are really required, right? And they're commoditized, and they have a cost, and they have some sort of value, even though the value is overseen by the end user, right? They have a huge value for other people in the chain. So I don't think they're going to disappear anytime soon, and probably ever, right? I didn't think that way a couple of years ago.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree, and I think Aron brings up a good point. First of all, the fact that he raised money from a legacy platform, I think, validates the fact that the world is evolving, and I think that's fantastic. Secondly, I do think that the sales channels that a lot of these legacy systems have out there aren't just going to go away tomorrow. They have, basically large sales forces that have deep relationships, and I think the question is how do platforms like us find ways to give them something else to put into their briefcase to add to the conversation that they already have ongoing with these local merchants.
One of the key things of legacy sales forces is today, and I think for the next generation, small business owners are used to salespeople coming into their shop to get product, right? They're used to that hand-holding, and they actually have one salesman that becomes their consultant. They call him, tell him, I need a permit, my fridge broke, or something like that, right? So they have these salesmen there. They're not used to, like the cool coffee shop in the corner that just goes to Staples and picks something up for his business, right? So, I think there's also a generational change until we can all distribute through retail channels, right? So there is a huge evolution.
One of the things I just want to quickly touch on from Google is that, a lot of people want to be your friend, and a lot of people want to be your partner. I'm curious, kind of what's important when you look at partnerships. What's kind of the key factor?
Yeah, so I think, first of all is a great understanding that you as a business would put your customers and users first. And that entails full transparency on what you're actually doing. I know a few years back when we had the reseller program, it was more or less, in some cases, the Wild West of just not transparency on how the advertising dollars are spent. So that's a key factor. Two is really an understanding of online space. If we're partners and we're talking about digital advertising for customers and small businesses, do you understand the philosophy behind Google's products and other products in the market as well? 3 is basically understanding and relationships that you have on the ground and understanding of a specific local space or even a niche, right? Would it be car dealers or would it be restaurants? And really 4 is a business model that could scale, right? Do you have the right platforms and right talent to really grow that business together?
So talking about some of the small guys, you know, between Delivery.com and Leaf, you know, a partnership is not a, you know, immaterial thing, and it requires a lot of legwork, a lot of money to kind of get it up and running. You know, outside of just kind of size, you know, I'm curious, Jed, when you're thinking about this, when you're like really going to commit to it, kind of what do you look for?
I mean, I think it depends on, you know, the category of partnership. I mean, we did a partnership recently with Yelp. I think as it relates to what's evolving in the POS world, it's a different type of, I think, diligence that you have to go through. But I mean, in the case of demand aggregators, like in the case of Yelp, we obviously want to find places that are going to be relevant to our consumers that they're going to anyway, and then being able to incorporate our content there. I mean, I think we look at ourselves in that particular kind of partnership similar to how a television network thinks of original production that they, you know, release in first cycle, like an NBC show like Friends is shown on their core networks, and then eventually it's shown on their local affiliates as reruns, and then it's syndicated internationally. And there's probably, as you go further out, they probably make more and more profit because the syndication business is a fantastic business to be in, but they had to have a good core product. So we have to have good core content, and then we have to find the largest kind of demand aggregation networks that are out there that we can partner with that will be relevant to our users. And in the case of the POS world, I think it's the same. We have to see who's out there, what they're doing, and that they kind of see the world the same way we do, which is that we're trying to find ways to, in the most efficient way possible, get orders to merchants so that merchants can confirm as quickly as possible because they're doing something else at the same time in that store, as well as an ability to be able to access all the inventory information that we would otherwise have to be aggregating and publishing ourselves. So if there's a way to do that more efficiently, and there's somebody that's doing both of those things, then that would probably be a right partner to start with.
Yeah, no, I think that's interesting. I think the thing with inventory that materially changes your product. The ability to access something like Leaf, to have kind of, you know, inventory in the cloud, it materially changes what you can actually do from a product side. And so I'm curious, you know, one thing you guys just went and opened up delivery for laundry. And so, you know, I'm curious kind of when you're going into a new vertical, kind of, you know, thinking about, okay, we want to build X, Y, and Z, we want to have a core services, but are there certain partners you're looking for? I mean, where does partnership fit in when you're actually going into a new vertical?
Well, in that particular case, we felt that was core to what our consumers are doing anyway. You know, food is something that we do daily because we're hungry, you know, at least 2-3 times a day. But there's other things that we do that have a regular, either daily or weekly cadence. And so in that case, those things are things that will plug directly into our site. But say, for example, there are somebody who used to live in New York who now lives in California, and they have kind of favorite merchants in New York that they want to access that nobody really knows about in California, but it's just, you know, I don't know, Barney Greengrass on the Upper West Side, and somebody in Palo Alto really, really wants Barney Greengrass, right? It's not so easy to get. And so to the extent that somebody aggregates that type of content, meaning those merchants that are hard to reach or nobody seems to know about locally, but they, you have a certain affinity to them, would we go about accessing those merchants? Perhaps, perhaps not. So if somebody's aggregated them, then that could be a good partnership for us to add another layer of interesting content to our platform that may not be core to what we do, because at least traditionally what we've done is we've, you know, knocked on the doors of local merchants and we've displayed what's available to you based on a particular Latin long address and is available for same day, right? But perhaps what happens over time is that, you know, as discovering things online becomes more easier, and people are obviously more transient, West Coast, East Coast, Europe, otherwise, that those local brands become, you know, extended beyond their own kind of physical borders. And so people on the East Coast are going to want things from the West Coast. And so perhaps there's a way for us to then start expanding into that over time, as an example.
Do you think this more efficient local ecosystem, is that going to give local merchants kind of a way to kind of strike back against Amazon? I mean, is there going to be a situation in which some of these tools and this kind of taking this, simplifying this complexity is going to actually kind of reverse the tide a bit from e-commerce?
What makes you think that Amazon might not help them? That's my question.
That Amazon might not get into this business?
My question is, you have all these big discovery sites such as Amazon and Google, right, who have put them in the map, right, either, aggregated inventory or aggregating merchants, right, making them discover. What doesn't say that Amazon, right, doesn't become that best friend of the local business and actually gives them everything, right? So I'll give you customers, I'll give you logistics, I'll even, warehouse your stuff. So I think there's a lot of openness, thought around the industry, especially around the giants that do discovery in that sense, right? Because for Google, it's the same thing. In my opinion, right, before the small business banker used to be the best friend of the merchant, of the local business, right? Now it's Google, right? So, most of their clients come from AdWords, right? Google Places is perhaps the best tool that they have in the world, right? So Google has naturally become that provider, right, of the merchant, right? What they're missing is that last mile of being able to connect the storefront.
So I mean, when am I going to have that beautiful one-click experience on Google?
That's a good question. There's a lot of moving parts and really a lot of complexities in this, but I think, Aaron, this is exactly where we're going, of understanding how can we add the different services and products that we have to really help connect those consumers on a local basis to their businesses. And we're seeing more and more of that, right? A good example is if we see now how G Plus is integrated with our different products, and especially when search, adding that social layer to local search really makes a difference for those businesses. So it's definitely progressing there, and I think we'll see much more of that with our partners as well.
Yeah, the only thing I'd add, I'm not even sure if it's a counterpoint to Aaron's, is that I think if local retail wants to be able to compete with Amazon, because certainly Amazon is going to figure out ways to be relevant locally, just as Google has figured out ways to do it in a complementary fashion, is that they need to turn their retail storefronts perhaps into distribution points. Because Amazon is finding ways to bring product closer and closer to urban centers. And to the extent that the kind of tax advantage that they have goes away over time, they're going to figure out ways to be relevant for the local store as well. So the local store can either see them as a partner, or if they want to try to figure out a way to compete directly, they need to turn their store into a distribution point as well as a point of purchase.
Just quickly talking about, going back to Ohad for a second, I'm really interested. I think local is a really misunderstood term. It could be small business, it could be businesses in geographic proximity. When you talk about layering all those services, how does Google think about local?
Right, so I think this is really where it comes to understanding how can we connect businesses to their real audience. Their real audience is not just saying we're giving you more impressions or we're opening you guys to more general customers. Are these customers relevant to your business? And that's where I think local really comes into play. What are the relevant solutions, products, and features that we offer for your business to connect with your relevant consumers? And this is basically understanding that space is what we want to do with our partners. That's one of the leverages that we really take with this relationship. We understand that some of these partners understand this business, understand these industries and verticals. And I think that adds into a play of the partnership when we talk about local.
To give you an example of that, talking about partnerships, like there's an experience that the three companies here could do. Yesterday you were ordering your Indian food, right? For example, we're saying, what do I want to eat? What would have happened if we told the merchant, right? We told them, there's 100 people that want to eat Indian food today, right? And they're actually around you because, Google tells us their location. Press a button and delivery.com will just send you something and give you an offer because we know you want Indian food. So that's the type of experience that partnerships could create, leveraging the data, right? So. Yeah.
Do you guys have something to announce right now?
Are you ready to announce that?
All right. Well, I think that's it. Are there any other questions from the audience before we kind of wrap this up? All right. Awesome. Well, I just give these guys a round of applause. It was a great panel. Thanks.